Welcome to Inside the Collective, where we dig into the thinking behind how people work. A quick note before we get started, this is one of our origin sessions. 6 early conversations recorded when the show was still finding its shape. It's grown since then, but the thinking in these still holds up. If you want, jump to Season 1, Episode 1, or stick around for this origin session. Production's a little rougher, but the conversation's worth it. Let's get started.
Nice to meet you, and thank you for taking the time to share some insights with us. For those of you watching along, that's positive for COVID. So if you see me blowing my nose or coughing or looking horrible, that's what it is. All right, Grace, we're gonna just jump straight in. In some of the lectures and writings, I've seen you mention that you don't fit into boxes, so you design new ones. What's a box that you had to break out of to lead the way that you do now?
Gosh, that's a great question. I think the box I had to break out of was a traditional career. Finish high school, finish university, get a job, go down the traditional career trajectory. That definitely has been my biggest box that I've had to break in my life. Being half Asian, my mother is like become a doctor, a lawyer, and like have a really good career and make good money in a traditional career. But I broke that box in 2008. So since end of 2000, end of 2000, since end of 2008, after my first job in Australia, I worked for a fashion company called Gorman. And after then, I've been on my own, doing my own things, and not following the traditional career trajectory.
How has mom adopted to your non-traditional roles?
Sorry?
How has mom adapted to your non-traditional roles?
I mean, she's got 3 very non-traditional kids. So let's be real. She's struggling, but she's, 70 now. So she's had a few years to deal with that. But definitely tough because neither myself or my 2 sisters have had a traditional career. I'm actually the more responsible one, where I actually have a job that maybe makes sense. Whereas my sister's like a death doula / many other things. And my younger sister was a naturopath / all other things too. So mine's a bit more of the normal side, let's say.
My brain's just screaming causation or correlation.
I blame it on my father.
From meta to untamed to worth club, how do you decide which containers are worth building and which systems need reimagining?
Yeah, so I mean, let me explain a little bit because each of them sort of work in different ways. So there's sort of like 3 levels of playing here. One is the community side, so building and creating communities. That's Untamed. That was, whether it was Creative Mornings that we run in Singapore, Secret Women's Business, various other communities that I built or brought into the region. So that was really like the community aspect of growing the ecosystem, finding gaps, and figuring out what does the not just on a local level, but what does the region need and how can I do that from a community building effort? Then there's like the company and the organizations that I set up. So right now there's, designing communities, which I run with Pung, which is focused on our community work and community strategy. Then there's the Worth Club, which is a newer piece for me and actually has been something I've been brewing on since 2022. And that's really around, creating a new framework around worth-centered leadership. So it's something in evolution. And that's my passion around, leadership development, personal development. And that's the space that I can explore all of these different dimensions that I want to write about under, a bigger umbrella of self-worth and well-being. And so that's where I do my coaching. That's where I do like my talking, my, presentations. So that's kind of like the business side. Oh, and thanks, Nathan. My Worthy Wednesdays. This is where like the Worth Club is like my creative outlet at the moment. And I don't know where it's going to go, how it's going to eventuate, but it's something that I just have this innate gut calling for. And then the Change School was also a business that I had with my previous business partners. So there's sort of like the 2 levels that I work on: the community, building the community, and then the businesses that I have, right? So how I choose things I don't know if any of you have done your human design, but I'm actually just writing a 4-part series on sacred. Okay, Paolo, you've done it. Okay, so I am huge into personal insights and tools and assessments. And, this gives an element, or those tools help me sort of like trigger a bit more of a systems thinking approach, but also kind of reaffirm how I'm wired, right? So I'm a manifesting generator in human design. Are you too? So I'm a manifesting generator, and that means that I don't like one thing. I am just not built to do one thing. I am really good at like 0 to 2 or 0 to 1. And because I can sort of see the gaps, and that's how I work, is I see where are the gaps, how do I fill them? Do I create them either through a community, or do I create it through a business, or do I create it through partnerships, right? And so knowing that, I now am like, oh, this all makes sense. And I've really, I live by design in that sense. And that's how I kind of go with things. And as a manifesting generator, your strength is to go with like your gut feeling. So if something goes hell yes, you kind of do it. And that's how I work. And there have been times in the past where I've said hell yes to something. And then I'm like, actually, like after I've thrown it out into the audience or the world, like a month later, I'm like, actually, I'm really bored with this. I need to scrap it and move on. And that's also the beauty, though, where it's like, I'm not really attached to anything. I used to fear being like, oh, if I put this out there and then, 2 months later or 6 months later, it no longer serves me or doesn't feed my energy, I need to still stick with it because I had like guilt or shame or feeling like I would be a failure if I didn't stick with it. But that is no longer how I do things. And now I just know, like I've known probably since 2012 more so, it's like, that's how I work. I need to find gaps, or I work really well and I identify gaps. I create opportunities for them, either create them or work with companies and organizations and places that do or can have that space. And that I'm not built to be in roles that are already established. I'm better built to be in roles that I create or that are entirely new, such as even the meta role was a completely entirely new function in the organization when I brought it. So I know that's a really long way of answering your question, but did that kind of answer your question?
Absolutely. It's raised another question for me. You mentioned that if I heard you correctly, you've transitioned a bit to a faster process of letting go when you find it's not right. What do you use to make that decision?
You know what? It's a lot of personal reflection and maybe imposter syndrome in the past, because I always felt from like when I first set up my first business, Agent Grace, in end of 2009, early 2010, I just was not doing things in the way that like I wasn't following that corporate trajectory. So when I first moved to Singapore, it was like everyone was still working in the corporate space, and I had already set up my first agency, right? Or the first business. And it was there that I was like, am I doing the right thing? I'm not even making money. I'm making like peanuts. Should I be doing this? That sort of stuff, right? And I think that took me a while, for sure. I think so, definitely a lot of reflection, but I think the trigger moment I have 2 trigger moments that catalyzed me into like the next stage of me. One was when it's like death in both periods. So one was my grandma, my Oma, she died in 2008. And that was when I actually realized I wanted to leave my first full-time role at Gorman in the fashion company. And timing just worked out really well because the company had sold. So it just worked out really well. So 2008 was my first sort of like, whoa, who am I? What am I living for? What really moves me? And the second was in 2011, which definitely was like the biggest catalyst and I've talked about this in many presentations, many talks. That was when my dad died. And that was when I realized that actually I don't want to do Agent Grace in the way that I had it before. I actually want to do other things. And that's when I really started to focus my efforts and my energy working in the space of social impact, building and launching the Change School, because I saw so many people who are at this point of like realigning life's choices with life's values, which is what the change goal stood for. And so we worked B2C, but we also worked B2B with organizations and designing programs around organizational pivots. So those two moments for me were really like the catalyst. But then over the time, it's also just like constant reflection. And as a manifesting generator, I'm a 5-2. So I'm like the 2 is a bit of a hermit. And so I need to have me treats. And I've always had me treats. Like now I have 2 kids, it's a little bit harder. My me treats are probably in the bathroom or, going out for a 10-minute walk. Before they were like week-long retreats. And I realized that is my process. I need to like go out into the world, gather all the info and the sort of like, just like everything, absorb everything. And then come back and take time and like not listen to what anyone else says. Maybe not even, most of the time I fall off the planet. And if like I didn't have a husband, people probably wouldn't know where I was because I wouldn't respond to anything. And I just wouldn't care if like, someone hated me. But yeah, it's taken a lot of time for sure. And I definitely still sometimes like go, is this in line with my brand? And yeah. And then I'm like, you know what, who cares? My brand will be something different tomorrow.
Sounds like private distillation is helping you make the decisions.
Yes.
You've led everything from global tech communities to intimate transformation retreats. What have you learned about building true belonging at scale?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's really knowing and this is a bit cliche, but really knowing like the needs and the desires of the people you're serving, and building a space that can be co-created. At Meta, when we were looking at some of the largest and most engaged communities. So our role, or my team's role at Meta, was to work both on a product level and on a partnerships level. So we sat under the product partnerships team. And so our work was really around designing better products to enable more meaningful engagements, community connection, et cetera, and sense of belonging. And in every one of the communities, everything from like the largest, let's say, photography group or meme group, all the way through to like the largest breastfeeding support group for Indian mothers, or even sometimes the most smallest groups, right? Like across various verticals. Everything was around a strong sense of like serving based on pain points or based on like connection points, right? So photography, it's like pain points even around how you do photography, right? What tools you use, right? There's pain points in so many different dimensions when you think about it. But, and when we created it for the Change School or various other ones, Creative Mornings, all of this, it's finding a space where people can feel like they are okay. Right. And I think that's the most important thing, and then co-creating it with them.
What blind spots you often see when companies try to build a community, and how do you help close those gaps?
Oh, gosh. I think with companies, there's such a desire to want to build communities because everyone thinks it's like, the easiest way for you to get advocacy, ambassadorship, loyalty, retention, all of these sort of things. But there's an underestimation around how one needs to, like the amount of energy and time and effort it takes, right? And if it is not something on the long-term sort of roadmap and that you don't have appetite for like the long-term journey, then it's very easy to sort of not have the impact that you want. So I would say misalignment of expectation to input required and, time required, to just like let it live, right? Like, because community is easy to start. And I always say this, community is super easy to start, but very hard to sustain. Engagement and sustainment is the toughest thing. And, every brand I've seen that wants to, more so in Asia, let's be real, they want fast, quick, and easy, right? Whereas I do and have seen when we are working with brands in Meta. So at Meta, we did also support brands. So we supported like Airbnb and their communities, right? Canva and their communities, Starbucks, Peloton, you name it, a lot of the big brands. But what I saw in those markets, because of the maturity of those markets, I think there definitely was a lot more understanding of like community is a long-term game, right? And also community can play across the life stage of your audience, but also your business. It doesn't just sit as marketing. It's customer success, it's product innovation, product feedback, product design opportunities. Like community can fall across so many different areas of a business need. And I think that is also another area that is misunderstood, because often people see community as just a marketing avenue or a channel, and they think they're having a newsletter as a community. It's one touch point for your community. So yeah, I think just to summarize, it's probably like one misalignment of like, effort versus time. Time both like that you input, but time for it to actually sustain and get to a level of like almost individual, where the community feeds itself. And then the second I would say is like a misalignment on where it sits or how it impacts your business, right? And that piece around everyone thinking it's around marketing. And then the third is like, really just the understanding of how to benefit or use community for your organization's needs.
Awesome. You've described your life as a portfolio life. What advice would you give to someone starting to shape their own?
Well, first I would say, sense check if it works for you, because I think there's a bit of a entrepreneurship, a celebritism of entrepreneurship and portfolio life. And it's not for everyone, right? I mean, I think, there are periods where I love it, and there's periods where I loved, like when I was at Meta and I could just get really deep into something and build something. So I think there's a couple of things to consider is like understanding yourself, right? Like what moves you, what drives you, where's their energy getting drained? What are like, those are where assessments are so valuable, whether it's like Strengths Finders, Gallup, or, like human design or whatever these assessments are. Like the more you better understand yourself and who you are and how you move, the more you will be in flow, right? And I'm like a huge advocate of being in flow. And that then will help you decide, okay, am I one to wear multiple hats, right? Because it requires a lot of compartmentalization. And to be honest, like there have been times where I'm like, oh my God, I'm doing so many things. I need to like figure out which one really sits with me, right? But because I'm so like, yes, that's amazing. I love it. I love it. So I would say understand yourself, really then carve out and decide, okay, what are your priorities? Is it like specific career goals? Is it financial? Is it stability? All of these things, right? And like kind of define them. If it's about autonomy, what does autonomy mean for you? How does a portfolio life potentially fit into your definition of autonomy? If financial goals are a priority, then maybe think about like having your full-time job and then building and testing something on the side, if it's possible, right? Like, and experimenting. Or the other part is trying to do like mini career experiments, right? So maybe you test, and this is what we used to do at the Change School too, when someone was wanting to shift careers, is we would be like, create a like 6-month roadmap or a 3-month, depending on your timelines and your priorities. Because if finances is a huge priority, then you're going to have different like metrics that you need to follow and timelines. But then build a career experiment over that time in the areas that you really want to test and learn. And from there, reflect if that like gives you energy or drains you. Because I think it's not for everyone.
What was your biggest unlock moving from a role like Meta into the current era of co-founding and ecosystem shaping?
Before, so I was at Meta for almost 5 years. Pre-Meta, I was running my own businesses for 12 and various different community efforts, right? And when I was first approached for my role at Meta, I was like, what? Why would I want to work for an organization? I mean, I've been on the other side for 12 years. Am I crazy? And then I went on this me treat, and it just kind of was perfect timing because with the change school, we sort of evolved and had sort of like passed on our B2B side of the business and sort of exited that. And it felt the right time. It was like this right thing. When I left Meta, to be honest, unfortunately, we were spat out of Meta because our team was totally impacted. So it was like, in my mind, I was like, okay, 2 more years, get myself to a certain stage. I was building a few things on the side. I was doing like my worth-centered leadership framework. And the universe was like, Grace, you've probably been manifesting this for 2 years, wanting to do your own thing back again. And so I'm like spitting you out in the world. So that's what happened. So I could see it as I was able to see those signs. But it took me a while because I think what I'm used to doing is I'm used to being like, this is the direction I'm going in, right? I'm making the choices. And when you get spat out of an organization and your entire team and your entire org is impacted, you're thrown back into the world and you're like, I wasn't ready for this. So it took me a while. And then, to be honest, I think the last 18 months has been a bit of a reshaping and removing layers of like what I thought I wanted to do when I first came out. And I know I connected with Nathan and David on this, was like, okay, I'm going to do community strategy. That's what I know. That's how I do it. Like I can do all of this. And the more that I got sucked into doing a lot of that stuff on a fractional level, the more I realized actually it's not really deep down the only thing I want to do. So I had to kind of peel back and go, okay, if money was no object, what would I really want to do? And that's when I started to expand. So, I started to partner with the Elevate group. So everything I do is in partnership. I never, except for the Worth Club, that's currently right now something that's just me. But the Elevate group, I partner with 2 other women, and they bring me in for the strengths that I have. Same with designing communities, the same with Pound. So for me, it's like, where can I fill in the gaps that I want to do that also add value? And then now what I'm trying to do is divide my percentage of time after now having 18 months to really reflect, to go, where does my heart really go? And maybe it's more like 10% advisory or 20% advisory work and board roles, like 40% in like fractional work, and then the remainder in like Elevate and my Worth Club stuff and speaking gigs. So that's kind of how I've divided my time at the moment. But hey, that could change by December too.
You mentioned value a couple of times, and from what I've read, you often talk about value architecture. What does it mean to design with values rather than just metrics or market share?
I think it can be metrics and market share. So the reason I started to use the word value was because I think we don't question enough what is the value that we want to create as a business, as an individual, right? So like for me, I think value is important for everyone and for organizations, but to really be clear, like if we're trying to drive X value, what are the metrics that we need to have around that? Because every business needs to have some level of metrics versus just more money or, just more customers. Like the value has to be an exchange of both a win-win for the customer that you're having, plus also the business, obviously. But so often businesses are like, I need to just gain more customers. I need to, make more money, versus being like, all of those things are possible if you really understand like the value exchange that you're going to be creating for your audience that can be sustained, right? Because you can get new leads, but those new leads may not be, the right leads. You can gain 10,000 followers, but you're probably better off having 2,000 followers who each of them would buy multiple of your products. And I think that's where I'm looking right now at like this misalignment of like what we define as value based on external and societal conditioning of like more is better. But in actual fact, it's not. Like there's been, there's so many examples where, and even Kevin Kelly, right? He talks about 1,000 true fans, right? And I think as a society, we've just been driven by this, like, we need more followers, we need more customers, we need more money. But instead of going, actually, what about the customers we already do serve? And how do we give more value to them so that they stick and they stay, right? And bigger is not better. And as we see with AI and all of this, I really do believe that we're going to have more of these types of collectives, like the Carrot Collective, all working like individuals or smaller organizations working together to create value in their own ways, in the spaces or the places that they play in, but to create more collective value as well. And that is something why I've always been a believer, whether it was Agent Grace or anything. I never hired people full time. I worked with people who were already doing what they do, and we came together and we co-created. And so I feel like we need to rethink what values are we driving that are not traditional, that have not been like ingrained in us, or it's not what we're used to being told, right? Like, and that's, I think, like something that I'm just kind of processing a lot right now is, we're driving over the wrong metrics. Like I said, more growth, more revenue, versus like actually understanding the people and those who we serve.
Sounds like you're collecting smart, like-minded people through every move that you make.
Hopefully.
If someone in the collective asked you how to lead with more soul, what would you tell them?
Gosh, I mean, I'm just going to say it again. Like, I feel like more soul for everyone is so different. And you're going to attract the right people. You are going to be singing to your own heartbeat. Like, we're all weirdos in this world, right? Like, I feel like we need to understand ourselves better, and we don't, because we have been conditioned to be like the good girl or the good guy or the great mom or the, amazing partner, or like a great leader in what like all the books tell us to do. But what we're missing is our own signal and our own understanding. And I think that truly comes with like sitting with yourself and like maybe now ChatGPT and being like, hey, here's like my, all my assessments, my Enneagrams, my Myers-Briggs, but also here's like my thoughts. This is my circadian rhythm. This is what gives me joy. This is what I've realized doesn't give me joy. And really like looking at it every so often and being like, am I walking to my pattern? Am I walking to my rhythm? And that is, I think, soul leadership, right? I think we are always trying to step into someone else's shoes of what the world says. This is what a good leader is. This is what like a great CEO or a great entrepreneur looks like. But there's so many different dimensions of that. As long as you don't hurt people along the way, right? As you're like owning yourself and your power. But I do feel we have lost our connection to ourselves and our sense of self-awareness. And I think that is also where we're seeing a lot of disconnect and loneliness and division in the world.
What would you do? This is our traditional last question. What would you do if you were not afraid?
Well, afraid of what? Because I don't like I don't like hiking or like jumping off cliffs and that. So it's just that my husband would probably tell me that's what I should do, is like go bungee jumping and stuff like that. But everything else, I'm not really, I don't have a lot of fear around like work stuff. Like, I feel like I kind of do what I'm already fearful of, probably. So I don't know. I feel like I could probably be a little less fearful around the adventurous stuff in my life. I'm not very adventurous.
So you're not coming rock climbing with me?
Unless it's indoors and I get to wear like a full harness and it's like, like the ones in Singapore where everything's got like perfect padding, then no.
I think we have different goals on that. So Awesome. Thank you so much, Claire. That's a wrap for this episode of Inside the Collective. Thank you to Grace for the chat and to everyone listening in. It's conversation like this that help us get better at what we do and how we do it together in the Care Collective. So I appreciate you being a part of it and looking forward to seeing what you shape next.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Grace.